Introducing 100 Days of Code with Treehouse. What is 100 Days of Code? It's a long-standing coding challenge created by Alex Callaway, and it's simple. Commit to learning every day for 100 days. The amount that you learn in that short time frame will change your life. Whether you want to level up your skills or jumpstart a new career, commit to the challenge. You'll be shocked by how much you learn and accomplish. You'll have the full support of the Treehouse community of students working with you. We'll be sending you motivational emails, clips from our 100 Days of Code podcast, featuring advice, tips and tricks from developers, and so much more. There's never been a better time to commit to your learning. Join us.
All right. Well, hello again, everyone. I'm Gil. I'm live streaming down from South Florida. As always, I hope you're all doing awesome and well out there. I'm a software development instructor at Treehouse. That's teamtreehouse.com, where I teach full stack JavaScript and front end web development. You can check out all of my previous live streams along with all the other live streams from other instructors in our YouTube playlist. And if you've been watching them, thanks so much, and obviously welcome back. We truly appreciate it. So far, I've done a few CSS-related live streams. So today we're going to shift gears a bit and dive into JavaScript and the DOM, or Document Object Model, which is a major part of how you're able to make web pages interactive. So with JavaScript, you can make elements on the page respond to users' actions, right? For instance, a user clicks on a button, or fills out a form, something happens. New content might appear on the page, form fields might provide validation hints, a video might play, and so much more, right? The possibilities are endless. So today I'll spend a little time teaching and demonstrating several DOM-related topics. So first we'll discuss what the DOM is, right? What is the DOM, and what makes up the DOM, and what does it really look like? Then how to access the DOM, right? How JavaScript accesses the DOM, and have a look at some basic tasks JavaScript can do with the DOM. And then reading and changing elements on the page via the DOM. And this is a multi-part series, rather. So in an upcoming live stream, I'll get into more things like DOM manipulation, listening for user actions, responding to user events, DOM traversal, and all that good stuff. And we also have our Treehouse staff moderating the chat. Thank you. So if you have questions about anything covered in this live stream or anything about Treehouse, totally ask away. And those questions will be sent my way as well as I'm doing the live stream. So let's get going. So like I said, the first thing we're going to talk about is the DOM. What is it, right? So JavaScript runs and can be found in many places these days. So for example, on the front end or the client side, which is the most common way, then on the server with Node.js, right? And it can even run on hardware and devices. But JavaScript was originally designed to run in the browser. In fact, each browser has a built-in JavaScript engine that can read, understand, and run the instructions in a JavaScript program. So the JavaScript that's running in the browser gets interpreted against these browser-specific APIs. And the DOM, or Document Object Model, is one of those APIs, right? So let's kind of unpack that a little bit. So almost everything in JavaScript can be treated as an object, right? Almost everything is an object or can be treated as an object. And by object, I mean something that has properties you can get and set, methods you can use to do something to the object, like hide it, remove it, make it larger, and so on. So you can select and change different parts of the web page with JavaScript by interacting with the DOM. So the DOM itself is an object-oriented representation of a web page. And it's referred to as an API, or Application Programming Interface, because it offers a collection of methods and properties that are natively made available to JavaScript in the browser for manipulating the page. All right, so then what makes up the DOM, right? Well, the DOM's object structure represents a web page or the document, right? What you see in the browser. It represents it as a tree-like structure. In fact, it's actually called a node tree or a DOM tree. And it looks something like this, right? So in the DOM, each HTML tag is an object, and they are accessible using JavaScript, and we can use them to modify the page. Now, typically there's a common structure in your HTML pages, right? You have a head and a body, and nested inside those elements, you have other elements, right? For example, the head contains a title element, a link tag, then the body contains other elements like headings, paragraphs, images, lists, and so on. So these elements can all be thought of as a tree, right? A tree-like structure of HTML tags that sort of stem out from one root element or object. So at the heart of it all, the parent document element or node is the root of that tree. Then the head and body nodes are like branches leading to other branches, right? So for example, the body might have a child div element or a main element, and then those contain other nodes like an H1, a paragraph, a list, and so on. We also might have what are called leaves, right? Which is the content inside the elements. Now, yeah, any text that is not part of an element or inside an element is called a text node too. So all of that can be accessed and manipulated with JavaScript via the DOM. All right, so you learned more about what the DOM is. So what does it look like? Well, you might think, all right, if the DOM is HTML tags, then it's got to be the source of my HTML, the source HTML of my web page, right? So let's get into that. So for example, I'm on a page now, good old MDN docs. So if I right click and do view page source, even though I see all the HTML tags and everything that makes up the source code for this web page here. Now, even though the DOM gets created from your source HTML, let me scroll down a little bit here. We're at the body, cool. So what you see here, it's not exactly the DOM, right? This is the HTML for the page, right? The HTML you might write. However, this is what's parsed eventually by the browser and turned into the DOM, right? So when the browser loads a document, this source code, right, all the HTML tags, they're converted into objects and put into that tree-like structure that I showed you earlier. And yeah, the DOM itself is way smarter and more dynamic than this sort of static source code, right? It's a living model, so it can do a lot of things, like it can automatically fix errors in your code. So for example, say you omit an important tag that's required in the document, like the head or the body of the page. The DOM's going to correct that for you, right? It's going to inject those tags in there for you. And you can dynamically change and add content and even other nodes to this source code. I know it's a lot to look at, but yeah, so you can do all kinds of things to it with JavaScript that's not going to appear in this view source, right? As I'll show you soon. Now let's have a look at a much closer representation of the DOM, right? So that is what you might see in the browser's developer tools here in the Elements panel, right? So even though it's not exactly the DOM, it's close, really, really close. Any node elements, any node or elements that you change or add to the page with JavaScript are going to show up here, as well as any of the document corrections I talked about, like missing tags, right, to make your HTML more valid. Now in here, you might also see things like pseudo elements, right, that come from your CSS. They're created with these before and after selectors, and that's not considered part of the actual DOM. It comes from your CSS, so that's one of the reasons why I wouldn't say this is exactly a sort of one-to-one mapping of the DOM tree, but it's my go-to when inspecting the document, nonetheless. Cool. So what's next? So there's a two-step sequence, right? When you want to control an element in the DOM with JavaScript, right? So first you select the element, then you can either read it or manipulate it, right? Find something, do something. So the browser has something called the window object, and it's a global object that has all the properties and methods pertaining to the current browser window, right? What you're looking at in the tab of a browser. So this window object is also what contains a DOM document, right? Which is the entry point into the web page's content, right? That's what you want to target. So for example, let me go over to the JavaScript console here on MDN docs, right? This could be any web page. So here in the browser console, if I type window, this is going to return all the properties, right, of the window object. And if I expand it, you can see that it has lots and lots of properties. Some of them are familiar, right, like alert, focus, clear timeout, and lots more. Now the one we want to focus on is document. If I can scroll down a little bit here. All right, so these are all the controls, right, that the browser sort of exposes to JavaScript. So we're going to focus on this property here, document, and yeah, so this is what points to the DOM loaded in the current window, and what we use to then select and control elements of the web page. So for example, let me clear the console here. If I access that document property in the console with window.document, that's going to return a reference to the document contained in the window, right? So here we see elements such as the HTML tag, the head, the body, and so on. So this right here, yeah, this is like the interface, right? That entry point, as I said, into the web page's content that I mentioned. There's also a shortcut, right? You can type just document, and that's going to return the same thing. And for example, something like document.body is going to return the body. Oops, that's not it. So yeah, so document.body is going to return the body of the current page. There you go. Cool, yeah, so let's say now I have access to the body, for example, so I can start to do things to it, right? I can read its content, I can change it, and do all sorts of things. So let's try document dot body, and then we'll target the style property, set a color on it, right? So body.style.color equals tomato. How about that? Right, so then, that turns all the text color on the page to tomato. And we can do something like document.body.style.background color equals, let's say, blue. Right, so you'd normally do this with CSS, right? But this is an example of how you can change the current page, right, via the DOM. In fact, earlier I mentioned that any changes you make with JavaScript don't appear in the HTML source code. So for example, I'm going to bring up the Elements tab, and notice how the body tag here now has a style property, right, with the color and background color that I just added with JavaScript. So if I go over to View Source and let me find the body here. So yeah, so here's the body. Those changes don't appear here, right? It's not a living model, as I mentioned, or like an exact representation of what's changing in the DOM as maybe the Elements panel is. So, the same thing happens if I change the contents of the page, right? So I can do something like, let's do the inner HTML of the page. So I'll do it document.body, inner HTML equals, let's say, an H1 with the text hello world. Hello world. Yep, so that's going to replace everything in the body with the text hello world, and notice how the text is still tomato red and the background is blue. But the body element, so let me back up a little bit here. So this body element via the DOM is now an object, right? And I can call properties and methods on it. So for example, here, the .html, the .inner HTML property, it's a property that gets or sets the HTML inside the element. So as you can see, this updates the DOM. So over in the elements panel, I see that everything inside the body was replaced with the H1. But again, that's not going to be the case here in the source, right? We're seeing the original markup. Because again, this is not quite the living model that the DOM is. Here's another example. In fact, let's do. So I'll use a selection method here to target the HTML of the page. So let's do document.query selector HTML, and then I'll call inner HTML on that. And I'll set it to a text node, right? So it's not wrapped within any tags, right? So again, just to back up a little bit, here it's finding the HTML element in the document with this method and replacing all the HTML inside it with just a text "Hello World." Now don't worry, we'll dive deeper into these selection methods in future live streams. So even though I've replaced everything inside the HTML tags with a text node, if you look at it here in the elements panel, the DOM says like, hey, I'll go ahead and add the head and body tags for you, right? I'll handle that. So notice how the text, even though I didn't specify it here in inner HTML, it was indeed placed inside body tags. Cool. And yeah, you also, let me refresh the page here to bring everything back. And as I said, you also can use other properties and methods of the global window object, right, to interact with the DOM. So for instance, the prompt method is the window.prompt method is one of those. So I'll paste in a quick code snippet here, and this pops up a prompt dialog that asks, "What is your name?" Saves it to this name variable, then replaces everything inside the HTML with an H1 in an image. So, I'll run this code. The prompt dialog pops up, says, "What is your name?" I'll type in Guil, and now everything on the page gets replaced with this "Welcome to Guil's site" headline and an animated GIF. If you've taken my JavaScript Basics course, this might look a little familiar. So this new content is now part of the DOM, right? As you can see here in the Elements panel, and you can interact with it using JavaScript. You can style it with CSS, business as usual. So yeah, I've so far been typing everything into the console, but even when you're writing inline JavaScript, right, inside script tags, or if you load an external JavaScript file using a script tag, you can immediately begin using the DOM API to interact with the page. Yeah, good question. So I got a question here. Can you export save changes in the console to a file you can save? There are some tools that let you do that. I don't use them myself, but I know that there are. Let me see. I know you can with, if you're working with preprocessors, but yeah, I don't tend to export any sort of changes or tests that I run in the console to a file. I know you can. Cool. So let's keep going. So one of the benefits, as you've seen, and if you've programmed a lot with JavaScript, is what makes JavaScript unique to other languages is that it can run in the browser. There's no need to set up a development environment, and you can start coding pretty much right away. Now, one misconception folks might have when learning JavaScript is they might conflate JavaScript with the DOM, right? So JavaScript, the language, is not exactly document.querySelector or element.style and many of the other properties and methods provided by the DOM API. The DOM itself is what actually allows you to use JavaScript syntax and all of its primitive types in the browser, right? And now JavaScript the core language, ECMAScript, and the DOM, they're two separate entities, right? So when you're writing JavaScript for a web page, you're writing JavaScript syntax and you're using the DOM to access elements on the web page. So really, without the DOM, you would not be able to do much to a web page with JavaScript. The DOM is that vehicle, right? And yeah, you can use JavaScript outside of the browser as well with no DOM, right? Most commonly with Node, for example. And what's awesome is that the DOM is also language independent, right? It's not limited to being used by JavaScript. The DOM API was designed so that it can be available to other languages too. So for example, Python, PHP, Java, I believe have implementations of the DOM that can be built for those languages. So yeah, any other questions, keep them coming. API, right, that offers a collection of properties and methods that are made available to JavaScript so you can manipulate the page. And it's represented as a tree-like structure of HTML tags or nodes that stem out from the root document element or node. And JavaScript and the DOM are two different entities, right? JavaScript is the core programming language and the DOM is an API. Cool. Yeah, so that is about all I have for today. Again, this is a multi-part series. The next live stream will have more demos about DOM manipulation, selection methods, traversal, and all that good stuff. So I hope that you enjoyed learning a little bit about the wonders of the DOM. Again, you can learn a whole lot more about full stack JavaScript, front end, and lots of other languages at Treehouse. So be sure to check out the free trial we have there at teamtreehouse.com. I'm also Guil H on Twitter if you want to check that out. And if you want to know what our next Treehouse live stream is going to be, you can visit this join.teamtreehouse.com/Treehouse live page and scroll down here and you can sign up for notifications on upcoming live streams. So if I scroll down, I can see that the next live stream is by Hope, who's doing a design Q&A on sprints, prototyping tools, and color palettes. Cool. So yeah, be sure to check this page out and you're going to get all sorts of notifications if you sign up here. So yeah, I think that's it. Again, thanks so much for tuning in. As always, stay safe out there, be kind to each other, and happy coding.